Shaquan Show.
Hey, what's up? Thanks for tuning in to the Shaquan Show, the only place where normalcy is not necessary, but flourishing within your means is. Welcome back to another episode of Hey Girl, nice to meet you. All right, if you have been rocking with me, hey, what up though? Welcome back. And if you are new here, hi, hello, nice to meet you. So glad that you've chosen to join me today. I am your host, Shaquan, and today we are simply picking up from where we left off last year. Yes, I said last year because you already know my phrase, my motto. A whole lot has happened in such a short amount of time. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. Long story short, I took a break for the holidays, went out the country, came back into the country. I got sick. I lost my voice, got my voice back. I feel much better. And here we are. So, yeah, that's that. Before I jump in, I got to give a shout out to my homegirl, Jasmine. Jasmine recently sent me a message and she shared some really just strong words of affirmation regarding me continuing with the podcast and how great it was and, you know, how helpful it will be to many women as well. And so thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate that because I know that your affirmation is rooted in truth and honesty. And I know that you're very intentional about that. And so thank you so much. I am grateful to have you. I got to give one more shout out to my homeboy, Callie. I told you guys that the fellas sometimes tune in as well. I recently saw Callie at an event and he had to remind me that I have not posted and he's been waiting for the next episode in this forgiveness series. And so here I am. Your girl is out here. Let's go ahead and jump in. So it does seem as if this has turned into a bit of a mini series on forgiveness. And again, like I said, I wasn't sure how long this series would be, but as long as I kept getting downloads, I would continue to talk about it. And since I was sick, I had a lot of time and I was able to push out about 3 more episodes that I want to be able to share with you guys. And so please continue to tune in so that you can get the rest of this series on forgiving things that are hard to forget. Today, we are diving into one of the probably messiest but most relatable relationships in the Bible story. Well, also, let me just throw this tidbit in here because somebody asked, was this a Bible study? And I mean, not necessarily. It's just that the way my life is set up, all things just lead back to the word. I've said this before. I'll say it again. There is literally nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new that we will encounter in life. There is nothing that we'll watch on, TV or movie, a book, script, whatever the case, that is just completely new, unheard of, never thought of before. Everything that happens in our life leads back to the word in some kind of way. And so I told you guys that one of my gifts that I feel for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, that I've been given is the ability to help others find them in this word that is so old, but still living and so applicable to everything that we go through and that we endure. So no, Hey Girl, nice to meet you is not a Bible study. But if you're tuning in, you're going to learn something. You're going to learn it today. So back to what I was saying. Today we are diving into, again, one of the most messiest but relatable stories in the Bible. When I came across this years ago, it truly helped me to understand some of the hardest dynamics in relationships. And I refer back to it often anytime I'm counseling or coaching someone in that area. All right. So today we are talking about Paul, Barnabas, and John Mark. If you are not familiar, quite okay. You can always go back and read it. And then if you are, then cool. You know exactly where I'm about to go with this story. I'm always going to encourage you to go back and reread it for yourself, because the real thing is always better than someone just, sharing it with you. But I always want you to get it firsthand for yourself as well. Because also you might see something where I'm wrong and share that correction with me. Like, I want to know. I don't want to just be out here sharing stuff that's not right, And so don't be afraid to read it for yourself. And then if you find something new, or if you just like see something that I forgot to mention or that I didn't catch, hit your girl up. Let me know. I always want to know. My hope, though, is that, as I share this story and we jump into the discussion of it, that you are able to, find yourself in the story, that it is relatable to you in some kind of way, whether you identify with one of the characters or maybe even all three. So I'm picking up in Acts 15:36, and this is essentially a disagreement that is happening between Paul and Barnabas. Okay, so it says, sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let's go back to the believers in all of the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they're doing." Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, but Paul did not think it was wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took John Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers of the grace of the Lord. He went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. I'm going to stop there. Paul, in this story, is an example of what happens when offense gets personal and forgiveness gets complicated. First things first, I said this in the last episode, offense is unavoidable, even for people who walk with the Lord. Jesus tells the disciples that it is impossible to live this life and not encounter offense. It's inevitable. There's a Christian writer by the name of John Bevere, and he emphasizes that offense and being wounded are productive tools that the enemy uses to destroy relationships here on earth, and then also to destroy one's relationship with God. And he suggests that the enemy seeks to inflict a hurt so bad and so deep that it holds the individual hostage to their past pain. So if you have ever been mistreated, lied on, disappointed, betrayed, abandoned, blindsided, hold tight. Let me get you a membership card. You're not broken. You are human. And sometimes the deeper the relationship, the deeper the cut. For you all to best understand Acts 15, you've got to go back a little bit. So I got to take you guys back, give you some backstory so that you can understand how Paul and Barnabas ended up in this space that we just read. Basically, long story short, what had happened was Paul and Barnabas, they used to be just like the it ministry duo. Barnabas, his name literally means son of encouragement, and he lived up to it. Like, he was the guy who believed in you when nobody else did. And he believed that you deserve a second chance no matter what you've done in the past. So then you have Paul, formerly known as Saul, who was persecuting Christians and ended up becoming one of the greatest followers of Jesus while on his way to Damascus to persecute even more Christians. And so when Paul got saved, he showed up to church, and the church folks were basically looking at him like, yo, isn't that the same man that was trying to kill us, that's been terrorizing us? But Barnabas steps in and he's like, relax, y'all. Yes, that is him. He was trying to kill us, but he's legit now. He's one of us. So basically, Barnabas ends up vouching for Paul's entire salvation story. And from there, they end up becoming just the pair that you expect to see together. They're traveling all over Cyprus, Asia Minor. They're preaching, planting churches, and literally out here in the streets, risking their lives for the gospel. Well, one day, word gets back to Jerusalem that there's a new church in Antioch that's blowing up, and people were getting saved left and right. So the church sent Barnabas to go check it out, to, encourage the believers, help steady things. And when he saw how fast the church was growing, he was like, oh, snap, I need backup. So he went and found Paul and brought him to Antioch with him. And then together they pastored, discipled, they helped to grow the church. They were basically this church power team, if you will. One day, there's a prophet by the name of Agabus that comes and shares that there's going to be a famine. So the Antioch church takes up an offering to support the believers out in Judea. And guess who they trust to deliver that offering? Paul and Barnabas, because why not? So one day during prayer, the Holy Spirit says, set apart Paul and Barnabas for the work that I've called them to. So the church lays hands on them in a good way, and then sets them out as missionaries. But they took a young guy by the name of John Mark to go with them to be their assistant. They traveled, they preached, they fought spiritual warfare, again, out here in the streets for the gospel. They're planting churches. They're just busy doing all the things that they have been called to do. But halfway through the trip, John Mark quits and he dips out. He packed his stuff and went back home, no explanation given. And Paul did not forget that. Okay, so put a bow right there. Fast forward, time passes, and it's time for another missionary journey, number 2. That's where we pick up in Acts 15, what I just read to you guys earlier. So Paul basically comes back and he's like, hey, Barnabas, I think it's time to run it back. And Barnabas is like, okay, bet. Let me go get John Mark. And Paul is like, I'm sorry, what? Who? John who? You talking about the same John Mark that dipped out on us when things got a little tight? Nah, homie can't come. Like, we're good. And Barnabas, being Barnabas, right? He refuses to give up on John Mark. So he's like, yo, Paul, chill. He deserves another chance. I mean, he's grown now. That was in the past. We're bringing him. It is what it is. I don't care what you're talking about. And Paul is like, nah, I don't care what you talking about. So Paul is standing 10 toes down and he's like, oh, no, he can't come. Yes, I did just censor myself. He cannot come with us. And the Bible calls their argument a sharp disagreement, quote unquote, which in 2026 means what? Things got heated, voices were raised, feelings were hurt, right? Pride was all up in the building, but neither one of them were backing down. And just like that, this legendary ministry duo split up. That was the end of their story. Barnabas ends up taking John Mark and going in one direction. And then Paul ends up taking Silas and going in the opposite direction. Barnabas choosing up really wounded Paul. Because remember, Barnabas chose Paul in the beginning. Like, he's the only reason that Paul is even on these missionary trips in the first place. So naturally, it makes sense why Paul would feel, betrayed or abandoned by Barnabas, because he's been there. Like, he's been the ride or die. But then he ends up choosing John Mark over him. Let me just pause right there, because it just makes me think of something. I think it is so important that you be careful of being so unforgiving that you make someone choose up between you and someone else, because you'd be surprised who they think they need more than you. I know that's kind of an ouch, but it's real though. So you have Paul here feeling like, bro, what's up? Like, I can't believe you're doing this, but okay, it is what it is. Because Paul essentially, he felt like Mark wasn't cut out for ministry because he had left them when they ran into a little trouble. So Paul is thinking like, why would you want to move forward with him? Why would you want to go on a trip with him? Clearly he can't handle it. I can't even believe that you're choosing John Mark over me. But you know what? It's all good. Do you? It is what it is, because that's what we like to say, right? It really don't be all good, and it really ain't what it is. But we just just take it on the chin and keep it moving. So again, Paul was like, all right, you gonna take John Mark? I'm gonna take him. I'm gonna take Silas. And that's what they did. And he did not forget how Barnabas played him. Paul had such a great memory. So he didn't forget, after all those years, what John Mark had did, and he did not forget what Barnabas did. But that's the story. That's what happened. Two godly men, both filled with the Spirit, both being used by God, loved by the church, doing great things in the community. Again, preaching everywhere, building churches, out here in these streets, seeing miracles happen. And they're still human enough to have a messy fallout. But notice how God used even their disagreement for his purpose. Because even when we clash and disagree, or, we walk away from one another, we don't see eye to eye, we break up, whatever the case, God's work still moves forward. Think about it. Have you ever noticed? I mean, maybe you have left a church or some establishment. The establishment didn't shut down just because you left. The good work that was happening while you were there is still going to be the good work that continues to happen even after you leave, because God can redeem the things that we break. And I feel very confident that I can say this without having a psychology degree on my resume, that holding on to past hurt is perhaps one of the most unproductive things that you can do with your life. There is nothing great or godly that comes from holding on to anger and resentment and hatred. We know how to get even. Like, we're good at revenge, but forgiving is so hard to do, especially when it's so hard to forget what they've done to us. And that's why we are so challenged when Peter asks Jesus, okay, now, Lord, so how many times do I have to forgive someone who has done me wrong? And Jesus is like, 70 times 7. Now, you do have some petty folks out there that's going to keep a tally of how many times they have forgiven you. But those are the type of things that challenge us. We're challenged when Jesus says, hey, listen, if you don't forgive others when they've done you wrong, then how do you expect for God to forgive you when you've done others wrong? Because if you don't know how to forgive, you don't hurt the other person. You only damage yourself and your relationship with the Lord, because God literally cannot forgive those who don't know how to forgive others. And let me just pause parenthetically right here. This is not a PSA to put yourself back in harm's way. You can forgive and still not be reconciled. You are well within your right to look at someone who has damaged you and hurt you and say, I forgive you, but may the Lord watch between me and thee while we are absent one from another. I can forgive you, but that does not mean that we have to start hanging out and texting and talking on the phone. Sometimes the relationship has got to come to an end. Period. It be like that sometimes. A few episodes ago, I talked about how God told Abraham to leave his home and his family and everything that he knew in the country that he was in. And Abraham was like, okay, cool. Yes, I will do that, Lord. And I'm bringing my nephew Lot with me. Same thing here. John Mark was never ordained by God to be a part of that partnership between Paul and Barnabas at that point in time. And so sometimes offense comes in so that an exit door can be created for the people that God never ordained to be a part of your situation or your life, or perhaps the time has run out on that relationship. It's time for it to end. There is a such thing as a necessary ending. And in this case of what we're talking about, some of us lose good people, not because they wronged us, but because we refuse to release what someone else did. And let me tell you why this is so real, because when you've been hurt and you won't forgive, you naturally end up having an issue with anybody else who favors the person who hurt you. And on the other hand, not every relationship is meant to be reconciled. Remember, Barnabas walked away with John Mark. Paul walked away with Silas. But the Bible never shows or talks about how Barnabas and Paul repaired their broken relationship. You want to know what's so wild about this beef? Paul and John Mark go on to have books in the Bible, but there are no books of Barnabas. We don't even hear anything else about him after this whole ordeal. And trust me, I checked. He ain't in there. I say all that to say that forgiveness is required, period. Forgiveness is going to always be required. Reconciliation is not. Forgiveness is required. Reconciliation is not. But to be clear, if reconciliation is going to happen, it's going to require time. We know this because, again, aren't y'all glad that your host be out here doing her research? You want a host that does research. I'll tell you that. There's a plot twist, because there's always a plot twist. So later on, right before Paul passes away, he writes a letter to one of his mentees named Timothy. And he says, do your best to come quickly. For Demas, because he loved the world, has deserted me and has gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia and Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is here with me. Luke from one of the 4 books of the New Testament. Get John Mark and bring him with you because he is helpful to me in ministry. Say what? The same John Mark that he rejected back in Acts. The same John Mark that he resented for leaving the mission trip early. The same John Mark that he refused to take on the second trip. I'm sorry, Paul, are you sure you are asking for the right guy? Because it don't seem like it. Make it make sense. We're all aware of that phrase, time heals all. Yeah, but I beg to differ. I feel that time softened something in Paul that made him let go of his pride, but it was actually God who healed something in Paul. And through that healing, forgiveness began to take shape in Paul. Now, it wasn't instant. It wasn't quick. And most importantly, it wasn't forced, because you can't force reconciliation. Sometimes it just takes time. And I really want to press in on this, because when when you're the offender and you want and you're the one that's done something wrong, you want people to forgive you right away. And you want things to go back to how it used to be. And when they don't, that's when you start talking crazy, like, oh, who do they think they are? Extra holy, extra sanctified, and start talking about like their character. But here's what scripture helps us to understand. And this is why I always come back to it. Like, there's not many things that I can talk about without coming back to it. Like I said before, not every relationship that becomes fractured is meant to be restored. And even the ones that can be healed, they still require time. Restoration is not something that we're meant to rush. So think about it this way. When you have a broken bone or a fracture, I guess those are the same thing, you go to the doctor. The doctor puts it in a cast, not to punish it, but to protect it and to give it space to properly heal. And then there are times when a bone is so damaged that keeping it connected would cause ongoing harm. So in those moments, separation isn't about rejecting that bone or that injury. It's about preservation. It's about preventing further injuries so that the rest of the body can remain whole. Keeping with the anatomy analogy, since I'm already there, forgiveness can also blind us from being able to see what God is doing. So while Paul was busy holding the grudge against John Mark and Barnabas, God was still blessing all of them. God was still opening doors, still expanding the gospel, still giving victories and miracles. And so while Paul may have lost John Mark, he didn't lose God. He lost his relationship with Barnabas. He didn't lose God. None of them lost God. Offense tries to come in and make you focus on what someone did so that you lose sight of what God has done or is doing or getting ready to do. I say this all the time. People don't leave the church because the snacks aren't good or because the band doesn't have a Grammy nomination. 9 times out of 10, people leave because of people. When people get to peopling and acting peopleish, people start leaving. I wholeheartedly believe that we can put ourselves in the shoes of any one of them, Paul, Barnabas, John Mark, in some kind of way at one point or another in our life. So your Paul moment may look like someone quitting on you or someone disappointing you because they showed themselves to be someone completely different than initially. It may look like someone who didn't show up for you the way that you needed them to, or maybe walked away when things got thick. They folded under pressure and you needed them to be stronger. You needed them to be the strength that they promised that they would be. Maybe you're like Barnabas. You're feeling torn in between people that you care about, that you love equally. And maybe you have a Paul that's trying to make you choose up. And it is so difficult. It is so difficult navigating conflict between two people that you care about. And we can definitely go on and on that topic about how it feels about being stuck in the middle of someone else's offense, right? Because I can imagine Barnabas being like, bro, like, why are you so? Because you're upset with John Mark, our relationship has to end. That's wild, but I get it, and I've been in both of those uh, situations. Or maybe you're John Mark you're the one who failed. You're the one who disappointed someone. You're the one that needs more time to grow. You recognize that you didn't show up well the first time, but you just want another shot. Or, maybe even in all that, your Acts 15 moment might just be God letting something break that you were trying so hard to hold together, not because he's punishing you, but because he's protecting your assignment. Some partnerships are for a season, some are for an assignment, and some are for a lifetime. And some God just lets fall apart so that you can grow. I know that might be a little heavy, but it's real. So with all of that said, consider going back to Acts 15 and finding yourself there. Like, identify your Paul, Barnabas, and John Mark moments. Where are you grieving a breakup or an offense or a disappointment? Are you holding on to something that God has already moved on from? And then also, it might just be helpful to pray for the courage to release what God is not requiring you to reconcile with. That's a possibility. It's funny how we really bring the lack of peace upon ourselves by, trying to hold tight to something that we weren't meant to carry or that we should have put down a long time ago. I think that we also lack peace because we struggle to see how God continues to move and continues to work on our behalf despite everything that we have been through, despite someone hurting us, despite someone, talking bad about us or rumoring or, just lying or whatever the case may be, ruining your reputation. And then God still continues to bless you and move on your behalf. And you can't even recognize it because you're stuck under arrest to past pain. You can't see all the great things that are still happening around you because you are stuck on this one thing that happened. God has moved on from it, but you haven't. So I think that it's important that we get into a habit of having gratitude about how God has blessed us even after someone has hurt us. And I say that very delicately. I really do. Because I know that some things are a little harder than others. I absolutely understand that and recognize that. So I'm not, I don't want to invalidate that as well. But that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If this episode blessed you or helped you to see relationships differently, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it, and then tell that friend to tell a friend. And if you're listening on your favorite platform, drop a quick review or a rating because it helps this message to reach those who may be ready to flourish. And they may not even know that they're ready to flourish until you send this to them. Again, I'll have new episodes dropping, I want to say Tuesday, but it's been a little rough. I ain't going to lie, but I'm going to try to stick with it. So be sure that you are subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. Again, this forgiveness mini-series has turned into more than what I thought it was going to be. So the next 3 episodes that I have lined up for this is forgiving those closest to you, forgiving yourself, and then also forgiving God. So you might want to make sure that you are locked in for that Again, I know that I missed a couple of Tuesdays, but my life was life-in. I'm human. It be like that sometimes. Make sure you are following me on socials at Shaquan Show everywhere. I'm really easy to find so that we can keep the conversation going. I would love to hear from you guys. In fact, I love hearing from you guys. You can also DM me on there if you have a comment or something that you want to share, need me to pray for you, need to talk something out. I'm available. Hit me up. You can also reach me by email, shaquanshow@gmail.com, if you would like to book some one-on-one coaching time as well. Or again, just need help talking through some things and, figuring some stuff out. I would love to hear from you guys. Your words might just be the key that unlocks freedom for someone else, to include me. So until then, in the meantime and in between time, I can't wait for you to keep meeting you. And now that you've entered into the Shaquan Show, you have no choice but to grow. Peace.
Shaquan Show.